For anyone that's watching, just going to wait a couple of minutes just to let people filter in. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask them in the chat room, and I'll answer them now. But yeah, just going to leave it for a couple of minutes just to get everything sorted. Alright, so I don't get feedback. Alright, so we'll start out with my team, just to sort of feel a bit of the air before people filter in. So this is what I've got at the moment, and I'll give you my reasonings behind all this. So at the moment, I've got my lineup is really mid-centered. So I've got Pendlebury, Fife, Kennedy, Parker, and Griffin as my premiums. I've chosen not to go for Ablett just because of the way his preseason's sort of been impacted. He hasn't had a full preseason. I know it's Gary Ablett and he's a gun, and I always do this, and I always get burned by not including him in my team. But yeah, I just can't seem to justify selecting him for round one, and I think that's because they've got a few easy games early on, and so I don't think they're going to risk the shoulder if for example Gold Coast they play Melbourne in round one. So one way you could look at it is that Gold Coast are going to absolutely smash Melbourne, and Gary will want to be a part of that, and team bonding and that sort of thing. And he's usually being pretty durable, so it's not like he generally gets rested in games. But the way that I'm looking at it is, if they're ahead by 40, 50 points, I think he's a candidate to be subbed out of the game, and that's at least for rounds, 1 and 2. Um, Again, in round 2, I think they play St Kilda, so two reasonably easy games early on for Gary Ablett. But yeah, and the scoring that he is able to output, I was able to make up in other areas of the ground, just by sort of changing around the structure of my team. So I'll go from the backs first. The real sticking point for being selected in my team this year is, have you changed your role in the side? Are you a leader? And have you matured enough, basically? So that's basically the case with all of my backline rookies. Heath Shaw, he's a leader for a young Giants side that's not going to be pummeled so much. So they're going to go to him as the get out of jail free card, basically. So he's the one that's going to be entrusted to deliver the ball out of the defensive 50. And he does that with great accuracy, sometimes sneaks forward for a goal, although it's quite rare. I think he's a great pickup for your top defender. Jack Nunes, I think everyone's got him. He's had a fantastic preseason. He's doing a lot more time in the midfield. He's bulked up 6 kilos or something like that in the off-season, so he's done very well. Heritier Lumumba, he's gone over from Collingwood to join the Demons. I think a lot of people think that people are getting suckered in by his prices in the preseason, his scores in the preseason. He did have that one very good score of 140 something, I believe, but in his other two games he scored above 100 as well. So that's very good consistency. A one-off thing, you'd kind of look past it. But the fact that he's in the leadership group in his first year in the club, and he's moving into a more midfield role, really stamps him down as a selection. Cade Koljashny, or the Kaleidoscope as I like to call him, he's quite a good price. He averaged about 80 across the preseason games, so nothing fantastic, but you've got to keep in mind that the preseason games are shorter than the ones in the regular season, and so you can't really look at the scores there as being a true representation of what people are, have the potential of. There would be less chipping around, which Koljashny, being in, that sort of half-back winger, he's likely to do. You get a few cheap kicks and a few effective kicks later on in the quarters. Rodney Eade has noted that he'd be moving up the ground a bit, so he'll be playing more as a winger rather than in the back 50, so that's quite good for him. Brett Goods, everyone knows about his scoring potential. He's done quite well in his debut season. Then he really didn't feature that much. But now he's back for a pretty good price. He was the one that got the upgrade for the Bulldogs, and I think with a new coach, he's really going to get a new life, really. And he's, what, 30 something years old, 31, I believe. Um, so you'd think that maybe they were trying to blood a lot of youth, but he's performed very well over the preseason, and I don't see why he can't continue with that. Another one that Rodney Eade has really endorsed is Adam Saad. Um, Great price. He's going to play. He scored what 60s, 70s in the NAB Challenge, so he's done very well. Why not pick him? Nathan Brown, although he's your typical do not pick sort of player, he's priced at a rookie price, and he is going to play. So you'd be silly not to pick him. A lot of these other players, you're like, oh, will he get subbed, or will he not get selected? Nathan Brown is a senior player, and he will get selected. Camden McIntosh I actually just put into my team today after seeing the teams that were released. So he is named on the wing rather than on the bench, which is quite reassuring. And he scored in the 70s and 80s in the NAB Challenge as well. And his endurance is really his big improved aspect, and so he's less likely to get subbed due to tiredness. So yeah, it's quite interesting. Uh, Hello chat. Do we keep Lambert? And yes, Joycey. Hi, Vernie. Um, Lambert, I'm not quite sure about Lambert. So I've got him in my team there. I'm really, I'm going to be one of those nerds that waits until whatever it is, five something, or whenever the teams are released tomorrow for the rest of the week, because Lambert's not named on the field for the Tigers. He's named as an emergency, and so do you really want to try your luck with that? I never really thought that he would get named round one. I had an inkling. Not sure why Newman's named round one for Richmond, but let's ignore that. Um, I mean, keep him for now until you see the rest of the teams, because you can't say. I mean, Isaac Heaney might not even get selected, and he's had a great preseason, so who knows? One player that is going to get selected is Tuke Miller, which is great. Another one that Rodney Eade is really bullish about. Hopefully, neither him or Saad get the sub vest. Miller's probably a bit more likely to get it, so we'll have to see what happens there. Um, that's all right. TH Moto, that's fine if you missed the start. Um, I'll just have a quick look at the other Twitter. Higgins or Lumumba from Zach Hev. Lumumba every day of the week. I never trust Higgins. Even though he has looked a bit impressive, it seems like he had to work really hard for his scores rather than Lumumba, which just happened. Pendlebury, as Paige likes to call him, Dependlebury. He's very dependable. He's a captain lock basically every week. He'll get you 125 every week. Just bang, bang, bang. Easy enough. Fife is going to explode this year, although he did have a very good season last year. And really, with the match review panel changing their criteria for suspension, it's going to be a lot more difficult for him to get suspended. So these little accidental bumps, he's going to get a fine instead of a week or two. So that's really beneficial for everyone to have Fife, and he's shown that he's a super coach gun. Hopefully he can get his kicking efficiency up, because then he could score 140. Honestly, like he's primed to have that good a year. Um, I was tossing up with a few other players for this spot. I went with Josh Kennedy just because of how consistent he is. I really value getting getting hundreds week after week after week after week, and I think Kennedy did that every round but two last season. Actually, let's have a look see right now. So FanFooty is really the website that I look at for all of my scoring. So JPK in 2014, those were his scores. So three times, 1, 2, 3. That one doesn't really count. He subbed out with an injury. So let's say 2 games where he scored sub 100. And that's really, really consistent, and that's what you will look for. And you can see in the past years that 2014 wasn't even his best year Supercoach wise. So if he could get 113, great. If he can get 115, great. If he can get 120, even better. So I think Kennedy is really a safe bet, and yeah, he certainly justifies my selecting him in the side. Same with Luke Parker. I think he's coming into his 4th year. And so there's a lot of room for growth for him. I mean, look at this patch of scores. That's crazy from what was a third. Oh no, he's coming into his fifth year, even better. So he's really going to be maturing. You've got Malcheski that left, which means McVeigh probably moves back. Actually, it's Lewis Jetta that moves back. So there'll be a lot more outside ball available. I know Luke Parker's an inside ball gun, but he can get it on the outside as well now, and that'll have the potential to increase his scoring even more, as well as just maturing and really coming into his peak years. So that's really beneficial for him. Um, no more questions there. Griffin, bargain, leader again at a new club, um, underpriced for what his output is, has the potential of putting up. Just mumbling my words here. He's good. Pick him. It's as simple as that. He said he's got love for footy again, which is great. Cripps gun in the preseason. He was named on the ball, I believe, in the as the rover role in the team selection sheet, which is great. Hopefully he doesn't get subbed. Anderson, a lot of people have him tipped to win the Rising Star this year, and for good reason. He's a Jet, really underpriced due to an injury which he sustained last year. Um, Hopefully he's not the sub. I mean, who else have you got at Hawthorn that could be the sub? I suppose Simpkin was kind of the sub fodder a few of those years. So hopefully Anderson escapes it, especially with Hawthorn, a few of their stars aging, and yeah, we'll see what happens there. Isaac Heaney, it was really a debate of whether he or Tom Mitchell or Zach Jones would get a game, but all that Heaney's shown in the preseason has been great. Then again, all that Tom Mitchell has shown has been pretty good, and he doesn't seem to really get a look in, so it'll be interesting to see what happens there. At the moment, I've got him selected just because of how good he is. Same with Cam Ellis-Yolmen, CEY, very, very, very good player. Contested ball machine, quite tall for a midfielder, picks himself really. And this spot I'm still quite unsure about. I was also considering Andrew Swallow and Lockie Neal. Lockie Neal had a really good preseason, and Swallow, while the thing that I really look at with my midfielders is have they performed in previous seasons? And with a few of these, it's like they've been up and down a bit. So Lockie Neal, for example, while he did have a few scores where he broke out, these are a lot of scores that are below 100, and so I don't really trust that. And although he does have an average of that, I don't think he's going to jump up and really be a 100 and something. He very well could, but I don't want to take that risk. I want to go for the pure, proven players in my midfield. Jack Steven as well, he's really underpriced, about 450, I believe. Yeah, 455. And he is capable of getting to 110, but last year, inconsistent, lots of scores under 100 again. One player that I really was much more convinced about picking was Andrew Swallow, because as you can see over these 4 years, he got lowest average of 101, highest of 112. So he is underpriced for what he is at, Andrew Swallow. And a lot of people will say, oh, but these were right after he came back from his Achilles injury. These are the scores from last year, and then he was pretty solid after that, which he was. But even if you look at these previous years, and even let's have a look at his best year, which was 2011, it's really up and down. It's not consistent. So you've got scores like 136, great, but then 75. 143, great, then 65. I know it averages out to being, a pretty decent score, but I really don't like players that go up, down, up, down, up, down. I mean, you can obviously have a good run here, but then you could look on the other side and say, well, that run there is not as great, with the exception of this score against Essendon. So that's just my criteria of doing it. And if you look at the website, you can see that is really the trend across all of his seasons. There's no real season where he hits out 700 plus scores in a row, for example, which a player like Parker or Kennedy have done. And Parker did it, well, okay, five scores, but yeah, 9 out of 10 scores being above 100 and 105 even. So it's really, really good. Reading a few questions in the chat now. Thoughts on Tom Bellchambers? I'll get to it. Dom Sheed. I'm not sure about Dom Sheed. I think he's in that awkward price range. So sorry if I'll just change this because it's probably gonna look through everything. Um, just double checking Dom Sheed's price because I did look at him and then I just I didn't like to pick him because yeah 214. So I think you'll get much more value out of a Cripps who's really shown that he's ready to take that big step up. Um, West Coast, although they have a really great forward line, their midfield could use a little bit of work. I say that with a reigning Brownlow medalist playing for their team, but it is true, and I think they've seriously underperformed for the talent that they have there. So maybe something magical will click, and Dom Sheed will be a great player for them this year. I just think that Cripps is going to be a better player. If you were tossing up between, say, Dom Sheed or Ben Newton, maybe you could consider Sheed there. For my team structure, it just doesn't work. That's just not the way I've gone for it. Um, but yeah, I mean Ben Newton's been scoring what 70s or so for Melbourne in the NAB Challenge. I don't actually know what Dom Sheed has been scoring in the NAB Challenge for West Coast, so have a look at that. The way you get to that is pressing this info tab here. Well, screw it, I'll just do it now. West Coast score table, score table, score table. Looking for scores by Sheed. So 73, 65, and 78. So yeah, it's all right. I mean, they're not Cripps scores. Cripps scored what 90s in that sort of ballpark. He had a score above that, I believe, as well. So yeah, if you were tossing up between the two of those, I go with Cripps, especially since he's been named on the ball, like I did mention. Yeah. Um, but yeah, if it was between Ben Newton and Sheed, it's really your choice. Next thing, Jed Anderson plays and misses the vest. I hope so. Rock Taylor, yeah, I'll get to that. A lot of people asking about Bell Chambers actually, and it's a bit of a double-sided, what do you call it? Swords thing. Two-sided sword, whatever you call it, whatever the analogy is. Double-edged sword. That's it. I really wanted to pick Mitch Brown as a as a defender. He was priced at 180, I think, if the top up players were required. But with Essendon being not guilty, I suppose now you've got your Heppel, your Watson, your Bellchambers, your Dalgleish and Sean Edwards. Dalgleish was another player that I wanted to select as well, but I don't think he'll get as much opportunity now that the players have been cleared. So interesting to see what happens. Um, Moving on to my rucks, it won't take much more of why I picked my team before I get to your questions. Goldstein, I think, is a gun. You've got really no one else. He's the best ruckman that. No, sorry, I'll say that again. He's the he's the best bargain premium ruckman, if that makes sense. So I think that is going to clearly be the number one ruck role because you've got Source Jacobs sharing it with Josh Jenkins, um, and you've got Mumford. Who would he share it with? Phillips, I suppose. That Shane Mumford's sharing it with, and then you've got Goldstein, and below him you've got Curry and Eric Wallace and Majak Daw. But I think Goldstein is the clear number one there, and I think he's just a really impacting player around the ground, and I think he's by far the best pick. I do like Big Ivan Maric, but I think with the state of his groins, they're constantly going to have to be managed throughout the rest of his career. Sean Hampson did get injured in the VFL practice match recently, though, so it's not like Richmond have a decent backup. All you've got is Tyron Vickery and Ben Griffiths, who are really second rucks. So, not sure what you're going to do there, but I went with that. And now for the question that everyone's going on about, the second ruck. So I've had a few questions, a few asking about Cam Wood or Tommy Bellchambers. So before I get to that, I'll just bring up all of their scores. So just give me a second. Cameron Wood, Bellchambers, Leuenberger. Because those are the three that we really should be looking at. So let's start with Cam Wood. Reasonable averages across his career. This is what I'm less bullish about, the lack of games. He is on Carlton's rookie list. He has been upgraded, but and he has been selected actually as the only real ruck for Carlton this week. Sam Rowe is probably the one that's going to be doing the backup work, but is he going to stay there? I mean, you've got Cruiser who will eventually come back. I think his official return date is round 2 or 3. So you've got him to come back in. So that's really going to affect Wood's job security. And then you've still got Warnock on the list. So I mean, I'm not sure if how Mick Malthouse really feels towards Warnock. I know he has a bit of a man crush on Cam Wood, but yeah, I would be less inclined to go for Cameron Wood just because of the job security. As for Bellchambers against Leuenberger, let's look at Bellchambers first. So, we haven't really had a chance to look at him over the preseason, obviously, because you had the Asada verdict hanging over the players' heads. Um, B, very up and down scoring. I tried to look at rounds where, in previous years you had Ryder and you had, even back a few years, you had David Hill sort of competing with Bellchambers for his spot in the team. And in those rounds that Bellchambers was really able to shoulder the majority of the ruck duties, he did all right. He got like 70s to 90s, and I think every now and then he would crack the ton. But it's just not consistent enough for me. He is priced at a bit cheaper than Leuenberger, but you've got Giles now, who's come over from Greater Western Sydney, who was really just insurance in the first place, just in case Essendon did get done for the performance enhancing drugs, yada yada yada. Um, and so, and a doubly bad thing about not having Bellchambers play in the NAB challenges, we didn't really get to see what the dynamic would be between Giles and Bellchambers if they were playing. So you're really taking a chance and um, a leap of faith, I suppose, in saying, "Oh, Bellchambers is clearly going to be the number one ruck." Well, based on what? I mean, Giles is a good ruck. They're not going to just toss him to the side or, not include him in the team. I think they would equally share their ruck duties because Bellchambers isn't bad up forward and neither is Giles. So they're both capable of doing that. So it'll be interesting to see because Bellchambers does tend to score his best when he can have that pure number one ruck role. And the reason I've gone with, as you can see, Leuenberger, is because his best is certainly capable of pumping out those big scores. These 2 seasons where he scored a bit less, played 3 and 5 games in those, and wonder why that is. It's because of an injury. So, I mean, this 8 really bumped down his score, but the 2 games before that, which count towards the average, cracks the ton. This one, 0 against Port Adelaide, which really smashes his average down. And then what? 79, 84, 94, and 96. I mean, those are very solid scores, and they're higher than what your Bellchambers is going to average. If he stays on the park, fingers crossed, knock on wood. And another thing, in the preseason, a lot of people will have noted, oh, but Leuenberger didn't score that well during the NAB Challenge. Well, that's right. He only scored a 72 against St Kilda, but it was from 59% game time, and he was sharing the load with Archie Smith here. So it's not like he was in the ruck for the full period. Um, so, you can expect that to go up against the Lions. I know he scored the winning goal, which really boosted up his Supercoach score at the end, but I think it was around 70 something when it before that goal. So, but again, 68% time on ground, which will go up. Um, and 44, not great again, but 52% time on ground. So it's clearly going to be more when the actual season starts. We've seen that he has good time on ground when he does play. I think when he had his really good seasons, let's do the more recent one of 97 in 2013, I think he had 80, it's either 84 or 87% time on ground. So, that's a big jump up in terms of how much time he is spending on the park. And I think for 2014, his official time on ground was 73% time on ground. And you might be thinking, oh, that's because of Stefan Martin and he's going to be, on the bench all the time or he's going to be subbed. Well, that's not the case because, I mean, I think this game against Geelong was really the only time where they did play together, and Leuenberger did score quite well. Martin came in around, the bye rounds and started on his rampage of great scoring. Um, the 70 whatever does take into account this Port Adelaide, so basically he would have had 10% time on ground in this game, and that would have really bumped his his average time on ground down. So he is going to be able to play with Martin, and Brisbane also are lacking with tall targets. So you've got Merritt, Patfull left, Darcy Gardner's injured, so you've got Martin, um, Leuenberger, not many others, honestly. You've got Daniel McStay. These are all really defenders as well, and Leuenberger and Martin are more. I know Martin played defence for Melbourne, but forwards and defence. But you can really shift him forward and have more of an impact. So I think they're less likely to be affected by the subvest because they are both needed. They're both big bodies, and Brisbane are an up and coming team. So that's why I've gone with Leuenberger. Hopefully that answers everything. Opinion on Swan, I'll get to that. My forwards, the reason I've gone with, I think it's Riley O'Brien. Because of this dual position factor. So if I do need to do a little switcheroo during the buy rounds, for example, can trade one of these guys out, move him here, put a ruck in there, whatever. And the reason I've chosen him instead of Mason Cox for Collingwood, I think Cox is average priced at 102. O'Brien has Adelaide, have. I actually have it up here in terms of when they play their games. Adelaide have a lot of Saturday and Sunday games and only 1-2 games on a Thursday/Friday night, aka the first game of the round. And so if you're using that captain's loophole, which I don't like, and everyone, I think it's a cheap tactic, but I'm going to use it this year because I need to win that Supercoach ring that is advertised on the Supercoach page, Facebook. I am going to use it this year. So if you compare it to Collingwood's, I think Collingwood have 7 Friday games. One, two, three, four, five. I'm sure I've missed some. Oh, and there's a Thursday in there. There's 2 Thursdays. So there's 7 games, whether the first game of the round. And so that really restricts your ability to have that captain's loophole option. You want to be able to have that player play as late as possible, essentially, if that makes sense. So you can switch the captaincy to another player if that's required, or yeah, it's better to have a loophole player playing later in the week. That's my justification for that. Yeah, Gray, absolute gun. Bring it back to fan footy. Over the preseason, he's scored very, very well. A lot of people are saying, well, maybe he'll dip down again. But really, the only reason for him scoring not so well in years prior is that he kept getting injured. There were always comparisons. I know they were from Port fans, but saying he's the next Ablett Jr., but he is looking quite like it. He's a damaging goal kicker who can play in the midfield. That's essentially what Robbie Gray is. And look at this, against the West Coast, 169 in the preseason. You don't get that from, having an off year. 80% time on ground as well, so that it can probably bump up to 85 or something like that. Didn't play against Richmond, and 112 against Adelaide in a losing side. So, and with 51% disposal efficiency, so that can obviously go up. And yeah, he's in for a big year, is Robbie Gray. Jimmy Bartell, again, this is more preseason form, but Chris Scott has also noted that Geelong were really lacking those more mature bodies in the midfield last year, and so they're going to switch someone into the mids, and that is Bartell. So if you look at his scores over the preseason, Bam 148 in a losing side, Bam 126, and Bam 91 as the sub, coming on at, I think it's halftime. Yeah, on after halftime, he had 47% game time, and he scored 91. That is how crazy Jimmy Bartell is, and he is a proven Supercoach scorer. So you have to pick Bartell, in my mind. Dustin Martin, ready for a breakout year. He had a couple of really good scores during the NAB Challenge. I have a sneaky bet on him for the Brownlow. I know that's a Richmond supporter saying that, but he really is set for a really, really good year. More of an endurance pace under him. Really, that was the only thing holding him back from the real premium midfielder scores, because he would often come out and before half time he would be on 91 and then end up on 110 for the game because he just petered out basically. So interesting to see what happens, but I think he's way too much value not to pick. Plus he's dual position, which is always a bonus. Bontempelli, I was tossing up between the Bont and Swan, which a lot of people are asking about opinions on Swan, but I don't know about Swan. I mean, he really he put me off last year by not doing that well, and in the preseason he really hasn't done anything to prove to me that he's going to have a solid year this year. I mean, uh, not Ulsan. Swan only scored 63 against Carlton, although it was from 58% game time, and he scored 88 from 75% game time. So again, his dream team scores okay, but for Supercoach, not really up to standard in my opinion. And you've got someone cheaper who is Marcus Bontempelli, and a lot of people talk about your second year blues and what's going to happen there. But you don't get 131 Supercoach when you've got second year blues. You don't get 29 disposals, 10 of them contested, 3 goals, 2, from 79% time on ground with 9 tackles when you've got second year blues. That's just silly. Um, I think the Dogs played one more. Bontempelli, sorry, played one more preseason game as well. I believe that was against Melbourne, um, where he didn't. Yeah, he only got 62, but I mean, no one played well that game essentially for the Bulldogs. So I think that's a bit of an outlier for mine. Um, and it looks like he ate a fridge over the preseason. He's huge across the shoulders now. So yeah, interesting to see what happens there. Uh, Salem, automatic pick. Everyone should have him. He's really changed from a midfielder to he's actually a defender now, like a rebounding defender. So um, should do quite well. Bargain price. Mitch Clark again, bargain price. Wouldn't be surprised if he was still sitting here at the end of the year. Hogan, his job security is great in my opinion, but he won't score enough to be on my field. Um, he'll get probably if he averages 70, that would be fantastic. I'm thinking more of a 55 is a realistic estimate for him, but that'll still go up in price. Um, Loney, tossing up between him or Tom Lamb. You've got Darling to come back for West Coast, which is kind of why I'm shying away from Tom Lamb, even though he had a bit more impressive preseason. Loney's small forward. He'll probably mirror your scores of a Jake Need or a Jay Kennedy Harris or that sort of thing. So very up, very down. Um, very likely to be hit by the subvest. So really look at when the teams come out to make your decisions on that. Uh, Answering questions in chat now before going to other questions that I was asked on the Facebook page and Twitter as well. Opinion on Swan did that. Ibbotson, I don't know. I've always really liked Ibbotson, but he never really uh, he didn't do it for me across the preseason. I know that sounds kind of sus, but um, I think he only scored in the 70s in the NAB Challenge game, so 73, and that's while playing as the +1. Again, only 71% time on ground, but it's a bit worrying. And 76 again, and that's from 98% time on ground. And really, Ibbotson's scoring has always depended on Michael Johnson and why is it coming down there? Johnson and McFarlane playing. So when those two are playing, he should be scoring higher than that. When he scores, when those two are playing, he is able to sort of play that more loose rebounding role, get a lot of marks, be the third man up. But even in this preseason game where those two other players were both playing and he had 98% time on ground, he didn't get those sorts of, high scores. So he is more of a proven player. What was his average across the years? So, yeah, not that great last year, but he did pump out a year of 94.5, which is kind of encouraging. But again, I think Koljashny just has more scope for higher scores, and I'm not going to get sucked in by what's his name, Clancy. Good old Clancy Pierce. I don't trust him. I don't trust him. I never did. I'm sure that he's done this before. And look at this. Look at this 30 from 68% time on ground. I don't trust him. He had one really good game um, in the preseason, but he always does that. Specifically remember him doing it a few seasons ago. So yeah, no Clancy either. Um, Thoughts on Taylor Adams? Only 378, 500. Yeah, I mean, with Dame Beams being out, it's more likely that he's going to be playing a more midfield role. Swan, who knows if he's going to be playing more forward or more midfield. Um, Interesting stuff with Josh Thomas. What's going to happen with him? Provisionally suspended, so at least for the first few rounds, I mean, Taylor Adams will be given a bit more responsibility in the mids. The thing that holds Taylor Adams back is his disposal. You've got a few players around that 300 and something mark, and they are Adams, Rich, and one that a lot of people haven't really talked about in Daniel Wells. Yeah, Adams, Rich, Wells. Yeah, yep, yep. So Adams had decent season. It did actually go down from his output with Western Sydney, probably because of these early games. I think he was more impacted. Excuse me, sorry, I just need a drink of water. I think he was impacted by the subvest a few times, and just while that's loading up, you've got someone like Daniel Rich who is a bit more proven. This score is down because obviously he only played the 3 games for the season last year. So A, he's got the played less than X games discount, and B, that score doesn't really reflect his actual potential. So Rich is a bit more solid option. Obviously, you have to pay. Actually, it's a bit less than Adams. So probably Rich, if you were looking at that sort of price range, I would go with Rich as well because I think Brisbane are really going to improve this year. They could push for 8th position. They just really need some tall timber. So look at them to trade them at the end of the year. But yeah, like Taylor Adams was affected by the subvest twice in the early rounds for Collingwood. So be interesting to see what he does. I would go with Rich. You've also got Daniel Wells, who is capable of scoring 104, and then the 2 seasons prior to that, 90 something, and he's priced at very, very cheap, 361. So that again, that's cheaper than Taylor Adams. So I wouldn't go Adams. I would either go Wells or Rich. Probably more leaning towards Rich. Inside sources say that Wells is probably going to hit peak fitness around round 4. So I know that's not ideal for Supercoach terms, but the fact of the matter is he's going to be playing round 1, even if he's not 100%, he'll probably be 90% or so. But that's not really conducive to good scores. And you can see even across last season, you had these scores where either he was coming back from a poor fitness base or something like that before he really hit his stride here, and then he got injured again, which pushed his scores down. So interesting to see. I'd go with Rich personally. Thought on Pat Ryder. Interesting to see the dynamic with Matthew Lobe. Obviously, they're going to be the 1-2 punch. Ryder hasn't been playing in the NAB Challenge because of the whole Asada thing. So, yeah, interesting to see there. You really can't tell. If you feel like taking a gamble, it could really pay off for you. I wouldn't. I'm more likely to go with the more proven thing. I say that even though I've picked Matt Leuenberg, who's probably going to get injured in round 4. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Can you think of a better cover up? Can you think of better cover in up for? Not sure I understand that one. Probably better cover if one of those get injured. And just speaking about Nick Nat, I do think that he's not at peak fitness. And I really wanted to pick Scott Lysett, actually, as my second ruck, but I think when he is playing number 1 ruck, this is Lysett. He is capable of scoring those big scores. Same with Nick Nat when he's at peak fitness. But I think neither of those scenarios are going to happen this year, and that's really going to reflect poorly on Supercoach scores. I don't know really who else has that dual position link. Sorry to do this, but um, is there a dual position link? No. So, David Hale, Zach Clark, Blitzarves, Gorn, Bell Chambers. You said you didn't want Bell Chambers. McKernan, no. Wright, no. Not really. There's no real people there that could be chosen if not for those guys. I mean, Ryder's probably too expensive if that's the one that you're talking about. Like, if you're talking about your um, Bell Chambers and Leuenberger pricing region, then Ryder's probably not applicable for you. So, be interesting to see what happens. But uh, no, I can't think of better cover. Basically, what you do with Lambert, again, wait and see what happens with the actual team selection. Captain loophole is basically you select. Sorry if I get this wrong because I've never been a big user of it. But let's do this for example. So you put someone that is going to play on the bench. You make him your captain because he's not going to play, and you make, for example, Pendlebury your vice captain. Oh, let's do someone that plays early. Martin. Let's make Martin the vice captain. So if Martin scores something like 100, something that I'm happy with, 125, I'm happy with that for a captain score. So then I would keep it like this. Great. And the way that Supercoach works is if your captain doesn't play, then you get your vice captain score. So in this scenario, O'Brien doesn't play, Leuenberger gets subbed on because he's an emergency, and I get Dustin Martin as my captain score. If Martin scores 100, for example, it's a good score, but I'm not happy with that for my captain. So then instead I put the captain onto Pendlebury. And because Pendlebury is playing afterwards and Supercoach has a rolling lockout, you are able to do that after the fact. So Adelaide haven't played yet, and so you can then switch to a different scorer, a different player. So then I've got two chances basically to get my captain right. Just look up Supercoach captain loophole on the internet on Google, and it's probably explained a lot better than that. But I did the best I could. Just going to switch this back for ease of access, but it'll probably be like that when on the night, unless I can think of a better way to do it. Next question. What are some good range pickups in Supercoach worth less than 300k? Less than 300. Well, you've got goods. I saw a lot of people picking McMillan. Do not pick Clancy Pierce. Don't like him. Taylor Hunt, maybe, would be an okay pick. He scored in 70s, 80s for Richmond in the preseason. I don't know if that's good enough to warrant a mid-price selection. But I mean, if you're looking for those sorts of pickups, I suppose under 300. I honestly can't say I've considered anyone in that range, just because that tends to be the dead zone in terms of Supercoach. Cripps, I suppose. Cripps and Sheed are the best ones you've got there. What about Andrew Swallow? I briefly touched on him. He's a good pick because he's a good pick if you're going to hold on to him for a long time, because again, inside source, same one that told me about Daniel Wells. He's best as he's ever been, and we can see. I'll go back to the page. He is capable of pumping out, your very big scores, and he does tend to start off seasons quite well. So yeah, across the seasons, past four, he would have averaged what 100, let's say 107 across 108, 109 across the past four seasons, excluding the last one. And we don't really take that into consideration because he did come back from a pretty bad Achilles injury, and that was impacting these sorts of scores. I mean, he didn't have great scores after that, but yeah. But just the fact that, again, even in his better seasons, he's very up and down and inconsistent with his scoring, that's what caused me to change it. I initially had Swallow in my side, just because he's very underpriced for what his potential output is. Like I said, starts seasons off very well, bang bang, okay, bang bang, but can drift off. And again, bang, very good start, decent, decent, bang, 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 bang. I don't like it just because it's very up and down. And the player that I compared it to was Josh Kennedy, who, even though he didn't score his best average ever, like he only scored 114 average compared to 120. He only scored, excluding this injury score, he only had two scores below 100. So if you want consistency, pick someone like Josh Kennedy, which I did. And that's kind of why I don't have Ablett, because I wanted that consistency. And I valued the consistency over the high risk, high reward, because there's so many maybes that could happen if I selected Ablett and Swallow instead of Kennedy and Parker, for example. So, yeah. Next question. Sorry, English is not my language. That's all right. I have Nick Nat in round as Ruck 2, and I'm looking for emergency cover in the forward line. Emergency cover in the forward line. Um, well, Nick Nat as Ruck 2 is okay. Can you afford Will Minson? Because Will Minson's only like 10 or 15,000 more than Nick Nat, and I think given that he does have that number one ruck role really sewn up and it's his and no one's going to take it, whereas West Coast you've got Nick Nat and Lysette really trying to share it. Um, I would go for Minson as opposed to Nick Nat if you're going for the more expensive option. Um, but if you're like me and you're wanting to get a money increase and then eventually upgrade to a super premium like your Mumford or Jacobs or something like that, then pick someone like Leuenberger, for example. Um, Emergency cover in the forward line, yeah, that's kind of tough. Like just the way I've structured it, I think Hogan is good at emergency cover because he will always play, even if he only gets you a 50 every week. That's fine for me. Um, Second one, I'm still not sure about, and we'll have to see the team sheets. And the general rule of thumb for me is if they're named here, they're less likely to play the full game. Whereas, that's why I kind of like it. McIntosh is named on the wing as opposed to the interchange. Uh, that's why he's here instead of someone like Oxley or Dalglish or someone like that. A lot of people are picking what's his name, Kieran Byrne, I think it is, um, who was upgraded from Carlton's rookie list, but he's not named. He's not named an emergency, so don't know about that one. Da, 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 da. Thoughts on having four gun mids? Also, will Paddy McCartan be a good pick? Uh, McCartan's been, yeah, he's been said to be named for round one, I believe, but he starts out at quite a high price, I believe. Probably spelt that wrong. McCartan. Yeah, oh God, please. Ah, Patrick McCartan. I did do it right. Whatever. Oh, fan footy. Haha. Or maybe it's not. Whatever. I think he's priced too high because he's the number one draft pick, so he'll be priced, way up there. The only player that I could really see being worth that would have been Christian Petrarca, but he's obviously done his knee, unfortunately. Angus Brayshaw, I suppose, a little bit. Nakai Cockatoo, I've seen a few people been picking, but I think he's likely to be subbed, Nakai Cockatoo, so wouldn't pick him. Yeah, I just worry about McCartan's A, his price, and B, his potential for being subbed. Four gun mids, well, I've done it, unless you mean only four, which I'm not sure if you would consider Griffin a gun mid, but this used to be. Oh, shit. Um, my lineup used to be. Oh, god damn it. Team. Blah. My lineup used to be. Pendlebury, Fife, Parker, Griffin, um, Neil slash Swallow. So I don't know. It depends if you want to go a more high risk or high um, stability side. And I think for the mids, it's important to pick your stable players because those are the ones that are scoring you the big scores. Those are the ones that are going to make you have a really good score in those early rounds and give you that advantage. Because if you get too far behind after the first few rounds, it's really hard to make up ground. And this is if you're going for, number one placing overall. So yeah, interesting to see what happens there. But if you're going to take chances, do them in your rucks, which I've done here, and that's not just a gamble. I think I've justified that. Your forwards, I've gone with one, Bontempelli. Still a little unsure about it, but I don't see anyone else around his price that I would go for. I know there's Swan, but I prefer Bontempelli to Swan. And your backs, which I think I've done three. These could all qualify as mid prices, but leadership and role change, proven fantasy Supercoach scorer, and lowish price and better than McMillan and Clancy Pearce, and move up the ground and very good kick and good Supercoach player. So worth it. Yeah, sorry about the footy show clash. No, I don't smoke bongs. Sorry. Did I rank better than? Oh, what's up, Benny? How's it going, Jim Bob? And Cam. Um, I am recording it, I think. Yeah, I think it automatically records. So, yeah, good for that. Um, I think this is more beneficial than watching the footy show. Um, questions that people asked. Answered that. Benel or Goddard? That's an interesting one. Because Goddard we didn't really get a chance to see as a part of the whole Essendon squad in the preseason. I think he's a very good player. If I could afford him, I would have him instead of Bontempelli, for example. But obviously your salary cap isn't that great to start with. He's probably my next best to come in. So I would go with Goddard personally, just because I don't know why he's a forward. He played in the forward line for the majority of the preseason and he scored at least 90s. So yeah, why not? He'll definitely play in the midfield as well. 2 points of difference in each position. I think I mentioned a few. Wells, Rich, Neil, Leuenberger, Taylor Hunt, so Koljashny. Pendlebury must have, yes. You should try and get Minson if you don't have him. Or if you don't have him, Goldstein. Or if you don't have him, Leuenberger. Ben Lennon, a good choice, as I've already got Clark Salem and Carnesis. Don't know about Carnesis. He really only had one decent preseason game. And I remember looking on, again, fan footy, he had the Vulture next to his name, which meant that he really feasted on the scraps at the end of the game rather than earning it. Yeah, see the Vulture, 95. So, decent score. He had to kick 3 goals for that to happen, though. And then he had a game where he scored 44 from 69% game time, and that's why I'm a bit more wary of him as well. Could be hit by the sub vest. Disposal efficiency is so if he has a shocker, like a few shocker kicks one week, he could be singled out by Buckley and dropped. I just think his job security is not as good. I'll go with someone else. Hogan is probably the best bet. I'm not sure if you have Hogan already. Ben Lennon, I initially would have said, yeah, 180k is a pretty good price for Ben Lennon, but he hasn't even been picked as an emergency for Richmond's game against Carlton, which I'm quite shocked about. I thought he would at least be an emergency and Newman wouldn't be playing, because Newman had a heart problem over the preseason, so interesting, to say the least. In midfield, Ablett, Pendles, Fife, Selwood, Neil and Bontempelli. Trade out Neil and get any player apart from Rockcliffe. I don't know. I like Neil. For me, I chose to do the more secure method of picking Josh Kennedy. I mean, as well, they play Essendon in round 1, and that's sort of a added bonus of picking Kennedy and Parker, because they would be coming off no match practice essentially, other than their training against Williamstown. But yeah, I think the Swans will win round one reasonably comfortably, and so I went with the Swans players. Although Neil's a good pick. Don't know why you have Bontempelli in the mids. I suppose it leaves you a bit more um, room to move with moving players between forwards and mids, but I think you could get better value by having him in the forwards and then having some player like Jack Steven, for example, in the mids. I don't know. I think you're fine the way it is. If you want to do that, um, yeah, I think the way you've got it now is all right. Nick Nurse or Bell Chambers, there's a 180 grand difference between the two, so it's a bit of a jump. Again, I've made myself clear. I'm going with Leuenberger. Josh P. Kennedy or Joel Selwood, flip a coin. I've gone with Kennedy. He's got this really unco style, but it just really seems to work for him. So yeah, go with Kennedy. Best mid-price forward for less than 300k to start my team. I honestly have no idea. Who are even the forwards that are priced for under 300? So I can actually filter it this time. I suppose I can't. Da, 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 Alright, let's have a look. What's in Crucio? Clay Beams, I guess, is okay. Oh, a lot of people are picking Kerridge, aren't they? What's this thing about? Whatever. I'm sure he's injured somehow. But I've definitely noticed a lot of people picking Kerridge as a breakout potential. If you want to really be risky, you can go Jared Grant. I think he's moving up the ground a bit, playing that more midfield role. Jeff Garlett might be alright actually. He's played quite well for Melbourne in the preseason. Um, Corey Galt has actually played pretty decently for Collingwood, but I think he has the potential to be subbed. Honeychurch is doing alright. He gives 110%, which is always good, and they're never going to see him subbed based on effort, essentially. Um, I would have said Chris Knights was pretty decent value. His body is like paper mache though, so it's interesting to see if he stays on the park. Wasn't even named again in the emergencies, so don't know what's happening there. And then once you get down here, people would have heard of them, other than Salem. If you don't have Salem, get Salem in your team. Uh, Ollie Wines or better options for less. Wines is what 135, I think. So let me just get Clark back into my team. Yeah, who would I sub out? Griff, I suppose. Better options for less than Ollie Wines. Let's see how much he is. 540. So, who have you got for less than him? Griffin. Swallow's okay. I think Wines will average more than Swallow. Yeah, Griffin's basically the only one. Ellis could have a really great season, maybe. It's very up and down. Crouch, before he got injured, I would have tipped him as having a pretty good season. That's about it. Stanton usually starts off seasons quite well, but then tapers off. Yeah. Oh, Jack Steven, maybe. He had that one season of 110, averaging 110, sorry. And then once you get down there, that's a bit too low. But yeah, that's about all. That's all the questions I got there. Stream is hacking. I don't know what that means. I will not lay off the bugs. Yeah, I know Newman's been named. I said that was a bit weird, just because he had the heart condition over the preseason. Like he had 200 and something beats per minute, which is crazy. You're never supposed to go above 190 or so. So interesting to see him named for round one, especially since he hadn't played any of the NAB Challenge games, and I think some players showed a bit more than him and deserved a spot. Like, I think Pettit, although a lot of people rag on him for his disposal efficiency and all that, he is very versatile and he gives 110%, which is great. You can't fault Newman for that either, I suppose, but Pettit's a bit more versatile. He can play as a marking player as well as a a rebounding player. But I'll just give the old Twitter another quick look and the book face. Nothing else on Twitter. Oh, got a few on Bookface actually. This will sound strange as they're in different lines, but can I can I swing players between lines? Hogan or Anderson will score more. Can I swing players between lines? Unless they're dual position, you can't. So you see this, like Gray, for example, has this mid next to his name. That means that you could switch. I don't have any. Oh, you could switch like Lambert and Gray, for example, between like freely. But if you're saying like if Heaney doesn't play, oh, if Heaney doesn't play and none of these play, do you get Hogan's score? Then no, that's not how it works. You need to. They need to be on the same line for it to score. So you can only get 6 scores from the forwards, 2 from the rucks, 8 from the mids, and 6 from the defenders. Except for during the bye rounds when only the top 18 scores count. So it's actually this cool little feature here where you can see when your players are going to have buys. I think, yeah, this is the round my mids are going to get decimated, but that's alright because the other lines are pretty decent. And I'm probably going to be doing some trading around those times as well. Beams or Selwood? Selwood or Kennedy was my choice. Just give me a second while I check the book face. Should have Bell Chambers as Ruck 2 and oh, I already answered those ones. Harry Taylor or Nunes? Nunes. Cochin, Griffin or Beams? Interesting. I actually had Cochin in my team a lot of the preseason, but the fact that he wasn't only played one game of the NAB challenge, I was a bit hesitant about that. But Hardwick says Kijio, Cochin, and Delidio are raring to go. You always say that's just coach talk, basically. I'd go with Griffin. He's going to have a leadership role over at the Giants, even though he's not a captain and I don't think he ever wanted to be captain. He's a mature body, mature head. He's got his love for football back. I'm sure that it involves getting paid a lot of money as well. But yeah, I'd go with Griffin if I were you. But I think that's about it. So for everyone that's been watching, thanks very much. Be sure to click the follow button at the bottom left of your screen. I can't see it because it's my stream, but it'll be like a heart down there. So click on that, and you'll be able to get notified whenever I stream. Also follow me on Twitter. My Twitter is twitter.com/tigermat123. And if you have any questions, be sure to just send me a tweet and I'll do my best to answer them. But thanks everyone for watching, and catch you soon.